Ladies and gentlemen, welcome to a recap video of the Warhammer Fantasy Roleplay campaign. Doing this video because the game has had quite a few things happen thus far, and I know it's quite hard to keep track of all the NPCs, all of the places, all of the people. It's a lot to take on board. So what we're doing is we're throwing this episode together to basically run through the story thus far, the last 4 sessions, which is going to be, well, 4.5, which is going to be about 8 hours of roleplay. So I'm estimating this may take a little while, but hopefully it's going to make things crystal clear as to where we're at currently. What I would say first of all is thank you very much, because there's been a lot of comments coming at me, private DMs, messages, comments, mentions in live streams, etc. that those of you that are watching are enjoying it, and that really makes me happy because I love doing it. It's an absolute blast to do. As you can see, I've been investing quite a bit of my spare time in doing it. I would say to the detriment likely of the YouTube channel, but I have to say this has really sort of got my passions as such going at the moment, and I'm absolutely falling back in love with Warhammer Fantasy. So first up, thank you everyone for making it even more enjoyable by tagging along for this journey. The plan is that this campaign will probably last, I've got plans for over a year. I have no idea if it will go that long, but I will be willing to keep it going for as long as I can, and I've got some pretty long-term ambitions for it, so we shall see. But to get things started, let's recap back from session 0, where our group were headed back to the town of Bogenhafen, having just completed some minor errands elsewhere. Now, if we do a little introduction to Bogenhafen, some of you may not be familiar with the town, but this is the largest and most prosperous of all of Vorbergland's market towns. Bogenhafen lies in the very heart of the Reichland and serves as the crossroads of the Grand Province. And it lies equidistant between the capital of Altdorf and Mournfort, and it's a crucial stop on the principal trade routes between the Empire and Bretonnia. Now, goods from Bretonnia and the 4 corners of the Empire are traded here for local lumber, wool, metals, and they're all shipped down from the Grey Mountains. Also silver as well, very big on trading this through, and lead in particular, one of the main metals that will go through in order to go to Nuln and other places to help, well, fund wars, make ammunition, you know how that goes. Bogenhafen is located in the Grand Wilhelm von Strappenheim's Duchy, but he's quite content to let the town be run by a local council, whose membership is dominated by members of the local Merchants Guild, as well as representatives from the Stevedores and Teamsters Guild, so long as they keep the money flowing his way. Now, as goods are coming north are transferred from wagon to barge within Bogenhafen, the city is always well stocked with warehouses full to the brim of fine wine and expensive, fragrant cheese. It's the place to be. Sporting a population of around 3,000 to 5,000. We're a little lower than the maximum of 5,000 right now, as we're setting this campaign fairly soon after a war, but a pretty big place to be. Now, our group were heading back here with Oleg and Grimwald, the Huffer and the Outlaw, both residing here, 2 brothers. The other 2 that were travelling with them, Rogelthorn, the small gnomish wizard, and Sienna, the charlatan, currently making their way to Bogenhafen for other reasons, which they may or may not reveal to the group at some time. Now, on the way here, they decided to go by cart to save on a little bit of money, and things tend to go wrong when on cart in the Empire, and this journey was no exception. Their cart basically snapped, an axle broke, and they were left having to walk the remainder of the journey. Unfortunately, goblins patrol the area, and they were captured, they were captured by nets being thrown over them, as well as clubs to the back of the head. An old-fashioned way of doing it, but enough to tie them up within some cages. Now, they managed to make their way out of this situation. They did lose their coach driver, but they were able to slay the goblins and their small tiny pet squigs and make their way by foot back toward Bogenhafen. It was a clear spring day at this point, a fresh morning, and a long day's trek ahead. You could just about see the city over in the distance. The morning was just breaking at about the time of them reaching land level again, having come out from the Goblin Cave, which seemed to be a converted mineshaft, although I don't believe the group were aware of what was being mined there. Moving on, the group walked a gentle and steady pace back to Bogenhafen. But on their route, they met another cart which had, only this time, been assailed upon by a group of bandits. Now, this is where they met the first NPC, Alize Magirius, and we'll do the NPCs in accent, I think, because it's going to make things a little easier for you guys to take on board, as well as refreshing on the token. So here we have a little ping on the token of Elise Magirius. Elise is a lawyer from the town. She has one of the seats on the council. A fairly prestigious family, however. She has just had some contracts stolen from her. These are very important to her. They also stole her purse, but she is not so worried about this. She needs her papers back. Fortunately, my guards were able to take down one of the bandits, as you can see a blood trail leading off to the woods. I would be most grateful if you could recover these for me. It is of the utmost importance. The group agree to help Elise and are able to bandage and stop the bleeding of her coach driver, who is also still alive and conscious but has taken an arrow to the stomach. After stabilising him, they take a gentle stroll into the woods and, after a little bit of fumbling, make their way to a bandit camp. Here they find two of the bandits, burying one of the others, or starting to, as the blood loss was a little bit too much. But the group are able to quickly dispatch these and recover the documents and Elise's purse, containing a whopping 8 gold crowns, which is easily enough to allow someone to retire for probably a few years if you're one of the lower classes and you're happy eating an apple a day. It was within this camp, though, that they also discovered 2 halflings, Matchwick and Candlewick Greenthistle. We moved into the town of Bogenhafen some years ago and started selling our famous recipe of pies, or rather selling the pies themselves. We've done rather well business-wise the past few years. You'll notice our pie stores all over the city. Recently, however, the noble houses decided that our pie stores were somewhat troublesome and a public menace, so they had them banned. We decided to appeal this, and we are due to do so in 3 days, but before we could do so, we were kidnapped. After having a simple drink out and an evening to ourselves, well, we've been stuck here in these cages the last couple of days. We suspect one of the noble houses is probably to blame for this, and we wouldn't mind a safe escort back to town. Perhaps even you could provide us with said escort. The group agree to help and take the 2 halflings back to the coach of Elise Magirius. It's there everyone has a small catch-up and begins the journey back to town, which by now it was about mid-afternoon, but the remainder of the day is spent trotting back at a slow pace over the sort of dirt track road back toward Bogenhafen. Now, on their way back, they are stopped by a guard who orders them out of the cart while he is searching for a green necklace which has been stolen and we must recover. The group are searched and they come up dry. There is a pearl necklace which Rogel Thorn had discovered within the goblin cave that seemed to have been stolen from a previous group that had been eaten, but no green necklace was to be found. The guards will let them go, but they are curious why there are a couple of dead bodies in the back. They explain the predicament, but fortunately, being a conversational bunch, they're able to sell their story rather well, and the guards simply allow them to return back to town. Now, returning back to town, it now is the evening, and the group are suggested to lay low for an evening and put up within one of Elise Magirius' favourite establishments, known as the Running Horses. Elise then takes the cart back to her own home and instructs the others that she will tend to her driver and request medical attention back within their estate. Elise is being pretty well off, heads back to this quarter down here where a rather large and prestigious home is to be found. Now, the group themselves are now entering the pub of the Running Horses, run by Mickey. Don't exactly know his last name yet, nobody's decided to ask. But anyway, Mickey welcomes them in. He's noticed that they've got a bit of paper that puts them on the tab of Elise, who's a good girl. She's a nice girl, she's a frequent patron of Mickey's. And Mickey decides to give him a little bit of food, a little bit of drink, and he puts them up for the evening with his daughter, Lindsay, who is a nurse in training and provides them with a little bit of medical attention because unfortunately Sienna, the charlatan, or Shauna, who knows, she did take an arrow to the leg. Fortunately, she's still an adventurer and she carries on going. But of course, she decided to shove her food full of belly full of food rather, before she decided to say that she'd been shot. Clearly got her priorities set straight. He also takes a particular shining to Rogel Thorn, because why not? The group then enjoy a decent night's sleep and are treated to some breakfast in the morning, although it's very much a grab and run, as when the halflings departed last night, they did provide the group with a job offer. A means to double their pay, perhaps. So the group, eager for more gold coin, decide to do so. I should also mention too that the group did at this point tell Alize that they found the purse, however it was empty, and Alize, before saying goodbye, decided she better give them some coin for their troubles, and so said to stop on by her villa at any point or estate, and she would give them each a gold crown for their troubles, making that total of 8 gold crown that they actually found up to a total of 12. The cheeky boogers. The halflings, offering to double their reward of 1 gold crown for bringing the group back, offered to double it to 2 gold crown apiece, so the group right now are raking in the money. They head their way over to the halflings and are greeted once more. The halflings explain their tale that they believe either the Steinhager or the Rugebroder, 2 of the 4 noble families of Bogenhafen, are likely responsible for this kidnapping. It's unlikely to be the Tugans, because years ago, not too many, the Tugans were destroyed and burned alive, crucified, and you name it, by the witch hunters. Tugans were caught up in something a little awful, so currently there's technically only 3 noble houses within the town. The Hagans are also on better terms with the halflings, and the halflings don't believe they will be giving them any trouble. The group begin their day following Gospert Rugebroder from his house to his offices, where Sienna, dressing up as a maid, and Rogel Thorn, casting a shadowy disguise, both enter the building and make their way upstairs. They spy Gospert Rugebroder doing some paperwork, and nothing more interesting is found at the time until he leaves, at which point they break into his office and discover some notes of which he was planning. They're not exactly sure what at this point, but all they can surmise is that he is planning some additional trade routes and making some schemes. The rest of the room is searched for anything of interest, however there is no signs of misdoings or misdeeds as of yet. The group at this point decide to follow further, and Mr. Gospert Rugebroder decides to meet with his father at the Golden Trout, a very prestigious tavern in the middle of the Dreikerplatz, a very large plaza where all of the noblemen will meet, all of the upper classes will enjoy trade, entertainment, and the sorts. Gospert meets with his father, Hieronymus. These 2 do not get on particularly well. Hieronymus is 80 years old and a little bit cuckoo in the noggin, if you follow my drift. Father, nobody else can understand you. Fortunately, I am used to your ramblings.
Anyway, Gospel Rugebrode is involved in trading of the livestock in Bockhafen, as well as the grain, the timber, anything of this sort generally will go through the Rugebrodes. However, he has some plans for additional ventures which he tries to explain to his father without much luck. It's at this point, when observing the two of them eating and drinking and arguing within the Golden Trout, Sienna having broken in to eavesdrop on such a conversation, that Gospert gets up to leave. At this point, he returns to his cart and makes his way across the town towards one of the more working-class areas, somewhere in the region of here. The group follow suit, and as far as they're aware, aren't observed. The cart stops, though, on one of the main streets, and Gospert Rugebrode gets out. He then makes his way down some alleyways, and the group in pursuit give chase, at a walking pace. They do seem to be acknowledged at this point, and they observe Gospert and one of his guards, leaving another outside, stepping into a building, being welcomed in by a young maiden, roughly the age of 18 to 20 and with fair blonde hair. They do their best to observe the building from all angles. The two brothers decide to approach the front and are swiftly knocked back, with the guards giving very little attention or desire to converse with anyone and sticking stoically to their duties. Rogel and Sienna decide to try and break in through a small window just to listen in. The window's a little small for anyone, even as small as Rogel, to squeeze through, but he is able to catch bits and pieces of the conversation, at which point they can observe they can observe Gospert disagreeing with the lady regarding some business arrangements that he has planned. She seems to not want nothing to do with it, and they're able to surmise that Gospert has plans to converse with the stevedores and wants something to happen with this lady's husband. The group is not sure exactly what yet, but putting their heads together, they realise that this is a strange meeting point. Mr. Rugebrode typically sends all of his goods to and fro the town via the teamsters, who drive carts and organise land transport. The stevedores, however, are in charge of the waterways and many of the wharfs. Currently there is not an alliance between Rugebrode and the stevedores, and such an alliance would stir up some trouble with existing alliances with the Steinhagers, who, trading in metals, obviously need to use the waterways as this goes back and forth between the mountains. So basically Gospert's looking to rock the boat a little bit there. But the argument is quickly over, and they attempt to converse with the lady afterwards, gathering this information, and then give chase once again. Grimwald at this point is discovered, repeatedly, by the guard he's attempting to chase, and ends up shoved onto his hindquarters, and the guard quickly moves off to continue his escort of Mr. Rugebrode, who then, at this point, arrives back to his home, and Grimwald stays to observe him for some time. The rest of the group, at this point, however, return to the Halflings to exchange the story and inform as to what's going on. The Halflings offer a small cash prize, or a small little reward for the small piece of paper which catches their interest of planned trade routes. They're also very curious about this potential alliance with the stevedores. This seems to be something interesting. It is then that they bid each other a good night, ready to follow the Steinhagers the following day, who have just returned back from a business arrangement or meeting outside of town. So the group then leave the Halfling Tavern, which is very much a work in progress right now. Not being able to sell pies via cart anymore, they are returning to the shop fronts as such, which they're starting to set up all over town in place of the old carts.
But once they leave this tavern, they are set upon by 5 thugs. These individuals attack them without warning and approach. Before, however, that they're able to swing a weapon, the group react with Oled charging in, slicing one and stabbing him in the side. And before any damage can be done to the group, the 4 assailants are slain. 2 of them knocked unconscious, the other 2 slain on the spot with gashes through arms, legs, and the back as well, I believe, as one of them turned to run. Unfortunately, though, at this time in the evening, there are patrols of guard, typically groups of 12, and this occasion was no exception, as 12 guard turned a corner, hearing the sounds of clanging metals and screams of individuals dying, quickly and hastily made their way toward the group. Instead of running, Oleg decided to be the law-abiding citizen that he is, and held his ground to try and tell the story of being attacked. Fortunately, the guards recognised a couple of the individuals on the floor as being lowlives that had recently been arrested, and with a little bit of prejudice, they accept the story of the individuals, however, request that some questioning is done. At this point, one of the individuals on the floor still alive and unconscious is pointed to by Grimwald, who requests that they take their friend back home who was injured during the fight. Now, the guard agree to this. And the guard do also take the other individual as well as the 2 bodies. The bodies likely to the morgue, but the other individual back to the precinct for questioning. The group are then able to do some interrogation of their own, having dragged the body some way, a living body still at this point in time, and performed a few pokes with a dagger in an attempt to search and steal from this gentleman. They're able to establish that he was hired by someone who works for the Hagen family. A little bit of a surprise, given that the Halflings had insisted they were on better terms with the Hagens at this point. But having got all the information they could, that the thugs were paid to drag the individuals back to a warehouse for questioning, the group decide that there is nothing more to be gathered from this and do not want to risk any stories getting out. So, knocking him unconscious once more, filling his pockets with rocks, they treat him to a paddle within the River Bogan. And with a sploosh, the thug is no more. I feel like we should insert one of the scenes from Austin Powers here, where we skip to the wife and children of the individual that's just been cold-bloodedly murdered, and he receives the phone call. Anyway, dark humour aside, the group make their way across the ferry at this point, the night setting in and the mist of the Bogan rising up. One of the curious characteristics of this town is that the Bogan in particular, with very still waters, emits a mist late in the evening, which really obscures vision within the town and makes it a rather dangerous place to be at night. Ideal for a smuggler and ideal for a thief, but not particularly safe for a civilian. But the group make their way across the waters via the ferry, and there they meet with the little grandmother of Oled and Grimwald, who's been looking after them since they lost their mother a little while ago. At this point, the little grandmother, if I go over here to the token, Granny Veska, she tells them that she's a little worried about Magnus. She's also a little bit worried about, well, she's not worried, but she's made a new friend, a little boy called Damon. Not like a witch hunter Damon, but like a Matt Damon. And anyway, she gives him a little bit of carrot stew and falls asleep in her little chair, all comfy. The group seem to be particularly well fed already, stocked up on carrot stew, or carrots boiled in water, kept in water, as the recipe would seem, and enjoy a night's sleep. Granny Veska sleeping in the morning, the group continue their day, or begin afresh rather, With the docks coming to life, they take the ferry across once more and make their way back toward the Steinhager establishment this time. But first, a pit stop is made at the Halfling House, or the Halfling Tavern rather, who are rather curious and taken aback by the recent attack of the Hagens, or at least an individual working for the Hagens, as the thug has been told. Curious, the Halflings agree to deal with the legislative issues regarding the guard and agree to send or deal with this in their own way. They request, however, that they continue to investigate the Steinhager, as this will likely be a little safer. They inform the group at this point that they will deal with the Hagens personally, or at least investigate the issue, although the group is not exactly sure what that means. So, at this point, the group make their way over to the Adel Ring, which is where as we mentioned earlier, all of the noble houses live. Now, the Steinhagers are the second of the 4, but one has been killed, so 3 noble families being investigated now. The Steinhagers, we will discuss their trade in a moment. But waiting outside the house of, or home of, Mr. Steinhager, the group see a commotion outside of Elise's house. Sending a Grimwald and Sienna over to investigate, they discover that there has been a murder. There has been a murder of the coach driver. You remember the individual who was bleeding to death on the cart with an arrow stuck in his belly? Well, he was murdered during the night. He did not die of natural causes, as he was torn open in a very foul and ghastly manner. Now, curious of this, Sienna and Grimwald decide to try and enter the building and offer some assistance. As they do, the guard from the previous day will recognize them and find it very curious. I don't know why I've gone a little Russian. He will find it very curious that they were in the cart and now he is dead. Well, they try explaining that they have nothing to do with this, but the best the guard will do is at least corroborate their story by marching them back over to the ferry, as well as the halflings, to see if their alibi of last night checks out. The address of the halflings, as well as the ferry and their grandmother, is given, and this takes a couple of hours for the guard marching the individuals around the town to satisfy themselves that they were not on the right side of the river to commit this crime, given that the ferry is the only way across the waters, typically. This satisfies them for now, but they are informed that they will be in touch. It's worth mentioning at this point that the group did also get their 5 gold, or 4 gold, that they were promised from Elise. Although she is currently out on a business errand already in the morning, it seems that she's unaware of this murder currently. But one of her helpers was able to, well, help and provide the money. It is then back to the Golden Trout, where the individual group follow Mr. Steinhager from his house with a little stroll over across the Dreikerplatz, wandering over here to the Golden Trout up at number 28 there. Sienna breaks in yet again, or actually enters through the maid entrance, and instead of mopping the floors this time is given some drinks to serve around, as they seem to be somewhat short-staffed today. The individuals within the establishment see no need to question nor interrogate someone who is wearing the appropriate uniform. It seems simply a new member of staff that someone hadn't told them about. Sienna then does a decent job of serving drinks within the Golden Trout to some of the more highbrow members of the town, and she does her best to listen in on Mr. Steinhager, who is currently meeting with Elise Megarius. Back when the individual group rescued Elise, she had mentioned that these documents that she wanted saving were regarding a meeting she had arranged for Mr. Steinhager today at lunch, and this is said meeting. Not a lot of information is gathered from Sienna at this point, however. Mr. Steinhager, if we
will move over to the token, is largely involved with trading the stones as well as metals from the Grey Mountains into the town and toward the rest of the empire. He has not a family as such, no father to cause him trouble. However, he does keep a close alliance with the members of the stevedores, who take care of his docks and wharf, as well as conducting the trade with the nearby cities. Now, during the Golden Trout, the only thing Sienna can observe, and cannot miss really, is Elise Megarius standing up in a fluster from the table. "You cannot do this. This is unacceptable. I will not tolerate this. We have invested everything into this." She storms out, Mr. Steinhager convinced that she will return at a later date in order to complete whatever transaction was going down. Sienna, at this point, decides it's a good idea to try and steal one of these pieces of paper from the table with a sleight of hand check. And as she goes to approach the table and places an arm near Mr. Steinhager, he slams her hand down on the table before she is even attempting or able to attempt to steal anything. Not best pleased with such a individual's advances on his personal space, he orders her to be fired from the establishment, and the usher within the room, though not familiar with her and how she was hired exactly, throws her out the front door. It is at this point that the group continue their chase of Mr. Steinhager, and we will have to wrap that up another time, as that is where we have gotten to. Guys, I hope you found this useful in getting yourself up to speed. There will be little bits that I've missed out here and there, partially because I probably won't remember it all, and also for a little bit of fluidity's sake. But I hope this has been useful. I hope it's been enjoyable. Remember, if you like this, the best thing you can do for me, guys, is drop a like, drop a comment as well, because these things really add up in terms of YouTube metrics. And maybe you could share it with a friend. If we could get this audience to grow a little bit over time, it would be fantastic, I think. And hopefully I can get you guys involved with some polls and some things as well to make things a little perhaps more interactive from your point of view. Once again, shout out to Danny for the help with GMing and such in the background, and a shout out to Sirenscape for the music that is currently being rocked. Guys and girls, hope you've enjoyed the video. I'll see you next time.